Welcome back. This is Today, Russia and ENCA. We bring you this now. Gender-based violence continues to be a pressing problem in South Africa. It's also become a major talking point for political parties in their 2024 election manifestos, all promising to decrease the rate of incidents. Now, Community Fund for Social and Gender Justice, the Hlanganisa, is committed to addressing this scourge. And they recently launched the Sisterhood Advocates Project. It's all aimed at making justice accessible for women and survivors of GBV. So from all this, I'm now joined by the Senior Program Manager at Hlanganisa Community Fund, Chiedza Chakuta, joins me, of course, this afternoon. And good to have you, Chiedza. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tumela.
It's a pleasure to have you. And in my intro there, I spoke about how gender-based violence in the country is a pressing issue. We can see even political parties speaking more about it in their manifestos. Let's dissect the problem and just paint us a picture here of how serious this issue continues and increasingly becomes in the country.
So the problem of gender-based violence is one, I think, that has been very well documented and researched, and a lot of commitments have been made. We have such good policies. I mean, on the region, there's we probably have the best legislative framework around gender-based violence, and yet we still have the highest incidences of gender-based violence, particularly violence against women and girls. And you know, that disparity between the actual implementation of those policies and the policies, the excellence of the policies themselves is where the problem lies. And for us as Hlanganisa, in the kind of work that we've been doing, is recognizing that policy and legislation alone are not sufficient to address gender-based violence.
Yeah. From some of the, political party manifestos that you may have heard or read about, are they bringing solutions? Because it seems the common promise is to reduce the number of incidents. But are the manifestos you've heard so far, if any at all, convincing that they understand the problem and have a good direction of where the solution lies?
I think the limitation with the election manifestos that we have at least reviewed is that the analysis around gender-based violence is really limited to the formal legal justice system, and that is still quite abstract for many communities that are still 20 kilometers away from the nearest police station when an incident of gender-based violence has taken place.
Yeah. I want to also touch on, what Hlanganisa is doing right now with the Sisterhood Advocates. Take me through how this approach will assist in combating GBV, but also another important issue, Chiedza, the access to justice and that right that women and survivors or any victim of gender-based violence can have, which is access to justice.
So the Sisterhood Advocates Project is a model that we conceptualized in the last 3 years and started implementing in about 2 years ago. And in the initial implementation of the project, what we sought to address is exactly what I've been talking about, that gap between, what we are calling the justice gap. And a lot of communities, a lot of women in communities really don't have anywhere to go. They find the formal justice system to be cumbersome, inaccessible in many cases, and there's no one to really walk them through that process of applying for a protection order, laying charges. Even once the perpetrator has been charged, just getting them to understand the formal justice system, because there's a lot of inefficiencies within our justice system.
Yeah.
And so what we seek to do with the Sisterhood Advocates Project is really to address that gap by providing support in local communities through women that are already living in those communities. Community-based organizations train them to provide that support and that accompaniment and really the hand-holding. And I think in the name itself, Sisterhood Advocates, there's a big element of sisterhood in trying to address, access to justice and enabling that access.
What about a more, cultural and traditional context? And we know that cultural norms also play a part in as far as intimate partner violence is concerned, we know there's those patriarchal eonces that play quite a huge role. How do you intervene there, especially if, let's say, for an example, a victim tries to approach the elders in the family to mediate through what is a violent experience within their relationship?
I think what's beautiful about the Sisterhood Advocates model is really how all-encompassing it is. So the realization that legislation and trying to address gender-based violence through the court system itself is not sufficient. We've also made room for the Sisterhood Advocates to also be able to navigate different systems, including the traditional system. In many cases, we know that women reach out for support to their peers through churches, through family networks, through neighborhood groups, stockfiles, and so forth. And there's a lot of information that's shared, but it's not informed, from a legislative perspective in terms of defining, what gender-based violence may look like, even in its subtle forms. And so even when navigating those different systems, whether it's traditional, whether women choose to go through a mediation process, because what we actually find, Tumelo, is that there are many women, particularly those that have gone through intimate partner violence, that actually do not want their partners to be charged, to be arrested. All they really want is for the violence to stop.
Right. Sheza, on that note, does it contribute to the low number of reporting, the low rate of reporting that we're seeing on gender-based violence? Because we have stats, but there's also that question to say, are these accurate? Is this the accurate number of reported cases, or is there still a gap there in terms of low rates of reporting?
So there's a number of causes why we think that the rates of reporting are low. One is really around the capacity of police stations and the issue of distance that I've spoken about. 5 kilometers when you are in a rural setting is a very far distance to walk to go and report a case. So that already discourages a survivor from going to report. But again, the issue of not wanting to criminalize your partner and just wanting the father of your children, your partner, to still be in the home, but really living in a non-violent setting. We also know that in many police stations, sometimes they're just overwhelmed by the number of cases, but police officers themselves, the capacity has not really been built in terms of being survivor-centered in the way that they offer the service. Sometimes it's really an infrastructure issue in police stations, particularly in poorer communities, which is, which are the areas in which Hlanganisa supports. And so statistics are a very difficult way of gauging gender-based violence, because really women are accessing other channels, and which is what we sought to leverage on as Hlanganisa, to say, let's try and use the resources that are within communities. Let's work with women that are living in those contexts and allow them to be peers that are supporting, other survivors of gender-based violence. And in many cases, those sisterhood advocates are survivors of gender-based violence themselves.
Well, Sheza, thank you so much for speaking to us about this very important conversations and seeing the efforts there by Hlanganisa Community Fund, bringing a more sisterhood advocates approach to combating GBV and having a surety of access to justice, that everyone, regardless or irrespective of your background, you have that right to access to justice. All my thanks to the Senior Program Manager at Hlanganisa Community Fund, Sheza Chaguta, for joining us right here on ENCA. All right, we move to this as well. South African cities are in a sorry state.